here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I'm here today to talk about food storage organization and basically what I do. But here's the thing. Each person has got to figure out what way they're going to organize their food storage that's going to suit them and make things easier on them. So while any of us can get out here and share what we do, it doesn't mean it's the right way for you. And as far as my food storage, my main pantry, my working pantry, that is constantly in a state of flux, which means it's always changing. I might have some things that stay relatively the same, like general areas where I store certain types of food, but I do also either have to add overflows or rearrange things just a little bit to make it more workable for me as I either add new things or change the way I might be preserving the food or how much of certain things that I'm putting up in certain ways. So let me just cover a few points. I'll be inserting some pictures, random pictures from my pantry and other places. And just to give you an idea, some pictures are older, before we added the wooden slats that Patrick made. And by the way, if you want to learn more about those, I did do a video on those. And I'll link to that in the description box down below if you'd like to see that. Kind of shows a little bit about how Patrick made them, but how we use them, so they're removable. But some of my older pictures where I just have bungee cords kind of holding the jars in place, I like the looks of those better because you can see the jars in there better. So that's why you'll often see me using some of those older pictures. But I'll be doing both. I'll be showing them both ways. One person was asking me specifically, like, how do you organize your like pressure and water bath canned goods versus your dehydrated goods? Well, I have a couple different things that I do, but one of the things I typically do, depending on what it is I tend to keep like foods with like foods, meaning I keep my dehydrated meats right in there with my canned meats. And since on a lot of my shelves, my jars are stacked, I try to keep the lightest items on top, but not always. That's going to depend on how I've got it organized because of the fact that I also want to keep the oldest food most easily accessible. So I do keep my meats and my potatoes roughly in about the same general area. I do the same thing with my fruits and vegetables in the same general area. And again, dried and canned typically are put together. But when I have a lot of excess, let's say like dehydrated apples, I don't store the dehydrated apples with the rest of my fruits and vegetables because there's simply not enough room in that specific area. And because I put up a lot of dehydrated apples every year, I actually have a separate, two different locations for them. And one that I just recently started implementing was taking a big box and storing them in 2 layers inside a big box on the topmost shelf in my pantry. And just so you understand what my pantry actually is, it is my oldest son's old room that after he moved out, we turned that into the pantry so we could get a lot of stuff out of Patrick's shop. Since a lot of the canned goods were not holding their seal due to getting too cold and then too warm in there. So we wanted to keep it in a more climate controlled area. And that worked a lot better for that. Now there are still some like whole grains and stuff that I keep stored out there. That's some of the long-term stuff that I don't worry about touching. I've got it put up in Mylar, sealed well, and then in large buckets. And so that's just one of my locations for our long-term storage, the stuff that I just am not worrying about rotating through. So in the pantry, what we did with that room was we got ourselves a bunch of shelves. Patrick built some as well. And so we've got 2 of the walls lined with shelves, and then there's another row of shelves right down the middle of the room. So I was hoping to shoot this video in there. There's just not enough room to set up the camera without having my face pressed up right against it. But yeah, because it's not a huge bedroom, but we got it maximized to the best. And the food goes clear to the ceiling on each side. And then basically we have 2 aisles that we can go down. So I do try to keep things organized by baking things like flours and stuff, the kinds of stuff that I might not already store in big buckets. And then on the bottom is where we keep the bigger buckets where we store dry beans and flours and grains, popcorn and the like. So coming back to the heavy versus light, I do for the most part try to organize things where the lightest things are on top, which is why I also put those apples on the very top. And then I have some in my overflow pantry little cabinet that's out in my hall. I think I've had it for a couple years, and that's been really nice. So that gets used for some of the overflow, like canned peaches, the dehydrated apples, because I have so many, but also for herbs that I'm working through or currently filling up from my garden. And also for things like walnuts, almonds, and the like that I vacuum seal into jars. So that's what that is. And just because I needed a little bit more area for organizing, especially something that would look nice in the things that, like the herbs in particular, because I usually have jars I'm working through and jars I'm filling up. And so that was the main purpose of that. But because I had so many shelves, I was able to also use it for an overflow. But some other things in my pantry is I also have all my pastas stored together. I do not vacuum seal them into jars or buckets or anything like that. I just keep them in the packages that they came in, have never, ever had any issues with them getting weevils or other types of bugs or going bad because they're dried pastas. They should stay good for many years. And I've had pastas in there for many years without any problem. However, depending on your location, something like that, you may like if you get a lot of humidity in your storage area, it would be a good idea to go ahead and vacuum seal your pastas, your cereals and whatnot into jars, which by the way, in our off-site location for long-term food storage, I do have cereals, crackers and the like vacuum sealed into half-gallon jars. So as long as they're vacuum sealed into your jars, they can't get any oxygen exposure. They should stay good for many years to come. I would even dare say indefinitely. Let me hit on something else about the stacking of the jars because there's a lot of misconception about this. You can indeed stack your canned goods. And I've done videos on this before, but I always get questions when people look at my food storage and see I have jars stacked on top of each other because I only have so many shelves. So I basically have to make shelves. But I always still have a layer of something like cardboard or some kind of thin board, plywood or something in between the layers. That does 2 purposes. It helps disperse the weight of the items on top across the jars at the bottom instead of the weight being directly on one jar to another, but also makes it easier for me when I'm reorganizing and rotating, because this is an important thing that I do is every season when I'm canning up more green beans, more peaches, more whatever, or the tomato flakes, because now I don't can my tomatoes anymore. I puree them, dry them, crush them up into flakes, and then vacuum seal them. And then that gets used for all of my soups and sauces, Italian sauces, barbecue sauce, chili. Since I have so much put up like that, I now have 2 rows of the dried tomatoes. So the newest ones are on the bottom row and the oldest ones are on the top. So those are the easiest to grab and work through. But yes, you can stack jars. In fact, even if you go to the National Home Food Preservation.gov, whichever it's called, you can go there. I've looked it up myself, and it even tells you there that yes, you can stack your canned goods up to 3 rows high. And I have nothing that is stacked higher than 3, most just 2. So then speaking of the herbs, I do have a couple of different sections for herbs. So I have the herbs I'm the herbs I'm working through in the kitchen, like my culinary herbs, are in my kitchen. But my medicinal herbs that I'm working through are in that little cabinet in my hallway, just right around the corner from my kitchen. And then all my other medicinal herbs are stored. I have one shelf in there that's dedicated just to the medicinal herbs. And then for all the overflow on that, since I do put up a lot of dandelion, a lot of comfrey, a lot of plantain, a lot of marshmallow leaf, that goes into, just like with the apples, into boxes that I then stack on the top most shelves, because those are the lightweight items. So always try to stick, again, to putting lighter weight items on the topmost shelf. And yes, some of this is in considering earthquakes. The lighter weight stuff on top just makes the most sense. It doesn't mean these things can't still fall and break, but keeping them contained in boxes, it may not look really pretty, but to me that just adds a little bit more level of safety to help prevent a major catastrophe of all my jars. But that is also why Patrick made those little wooden slats that I can remove and put back on, is to help hold everything in place in case of an earthquake. But you got to figure though, no matter what, a very, very massive earthquake, most likely you're going to lose everything anyway, no matter the methods you take. Some other storage items that I have that I don't necessarily repackage anymore, I used to, but I don't do this anymore, would be some of my different dairy powders, because I find that as long as I leave them in the sealed packages they came in, I have no issues with them. When I then go to, let's say I run out of the ones in the jars in my kitchen, which I do not vacuum seal in between, I just use them straight out of the jars. I've been using out of some of the same ones for a couple years with no issues, but when I run out, I can then simply open up a package and then fill up my jars with that. And even then, most of the package, like the Anthony's goods, they have, and I think the Judy's, they have like Ziploc seals, or you can fold them over tightly and clip them with like a good stainless steel clothespin or other type of chip clip type thing. And I've had no issues. So initially, when I first started really putting up the dairy powders, I was repackaging them into jars, but then I just found that was really absolutely unnecessary, because your dairy powders can last for many years without having to repackage them. So that's going to be a matter of choice. And that way too, I can much more easily store them in the packages they came in. So I just have a couple of boxes where a lot of that stuff just gets piled into, and then I just dig through it as I need. And then, another thing I don't always remember to mention is I do have, because I did this years ago, but it ended up over time still running out of space in it. But I don't think you can get this set anymore, but for a pretty good deal at the time, I had bought this set of stackable drawers that I could easily organize my different spices in. So right now, that's pretty much all it's used for, is spices, not the medicinal herbs. And I just keep them in those little drawers. And when I run out in the kitchen, I just go to the drawer that I've labeled, chili powder, cinnamon, whatever, and pull them out of there and then refill my kitchen jars from those. And so that's another method. And that would actually, I wouldn't mind having more like that for the rest of like the medicinal herbs that I purchase, since those are already in their own packaging. And again, with those, I just leave them now in their packaging. I only vacuum seal into jars the herbs I get from my own garden. So again, it's really a matter of figuring out, okay, what's going to be the best ease of use for me? And it's very likely next year I'll probably reorganize some stuff again. But for the most part, I do keep it, like items with like items as best as I am able to do, not counting the excess, the overflow, the stuff that's maybe I'm more newly put up and I don't need to get to right away, just like those apples. So I've got dried apples that are in my overflow now that are from 2 years ago. I will work through those first, while the ones that I put up from this past year are the ones in that box on the top shelf that I need a step ladder to get to. So obviously that's where the rotation comes in. And I do also have other cabinets and places, like in my laundry room area. We have a really big cabinet in there that I don't need it for all my laundry stuff, because I basically, the only thing I use in my laundry is my homemade laundry powder, and I always just keep a couple of jars. So that cabinet also is used for other types of food storage, such as my cocoa powder and my organic chocolate chips. I have all these different areas, but everything is still organized so that I know this is where I keep that, this is where I keep that, and this is where I keep that, at least generally speaking. So anyway, any helpful tips or ideas you would like to share, please put those in comments down below so people can get some ideas from you as well, and maybe I will too. And any questions you might have that is something I may have missed, go ahead and put those down below as well. And remember that sometimes, because comments, I don't always see all the comments, so I try. If you have an important question and I don't get back to you within a day or two, it's probably because I didn't see your comment. You can always email me at raincountryhomestead@gmail.com, and my emails I do always see. And thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.